My name's Will Masek, and I'm a mentor here at CG Spectrum, as well as a content creator. I've been here about 4 years now, so I've taught a fair few students. When I'm not teaching, I'm making games. I've made games for quite a few big franchises now, but yeah, teaching is my main passion these days. I always love games. I spent far too much of my time playing games. It was just something that I gravitated towards. I mean, I never got into programming. To be honest, when I was thinking of going to university, I was split between doing drama or doing computer science. Those were my two things. I was really, I was quite into like all the school like acting and that kind of stuff. But games were always a passion. They were always something that I spent a huge amount of time doing. And yeah, I was just fascinated by how they worked and the whole industry. I had a few, just as a kid, I used to write game reviews and send them into game magazines, and I had a few of them published and that kind of stuff. So I think that little things like that just kind of fuel the fire for just getting deeper and deeper into that industry. I started studying computer science at university, so that was way back in 2005. To be honest, it didn't go great. I was actually very bad at it. I was a very bad programmer. It just didn't click with me at all, one iota. And I ended up more or less kind of failing my first year. And I switched courses. There was a brand new course for game development, which is kind of why I got into computer science in the first place. So I thought, yeah, why not? The course was pretty rough and ready. It was that era of game development courses where they didn't exist before that point. Like this was one of the first ones. So yeah, it was rough, but suddenly it just clicked with me. As soon as the programming was put in a context that I understood and I could engage with, I just did so much better. I think I got like 84% in my first year or something compared to failing my first year of computer science. So yeah, it clicked with me a lot more, and from there it just snowballed really. Once I'd kind of completed my course there, I still didn't really quite know enough to get into industry, so I did get a job as a software engineer. I was making traffic software for a company outside of Bristol, which wasn't the most interesting thing ever. But yeah, I learned an awful lot from it. After that, I went back to uni. I went and did a master's degree. Kind of the games courses had kind of progressed a bit more then. So I went to university in London this time. And it was off the back of them that I got my first break in the industry, really. As part of my course, I had to do an internship. To be honest, I didn't actually put that many applications out. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. It took me quite a long time to graduate from my undergraduate course. So a lot of my friends had already kind of gone into industry by this point. A friend of mine already had a job at Rebellion Developments in Oxford. And it just made an awful lot of sense to me. I loved the stuff that they made. He was a good friend of mine. So I thought, right, that's where I'm going to go. So I put in my application there. And I went for the interview. It seemed to be going well. I went for the code interview when you have to kind of pass a code test for this stuff. And I didn't feel like it went that great. In fact, there was a mistake I made that I was absolutely kicking myself about afterwards. And on the train on the way home, I remember like getting my laptop out and like figuring out exactly where I went wrong. And then later on that day, I emailed the guy like, I know what I did wrong. Here's the kind of updated thing. And to be fair, he emailed me back saying, it's fine, don't worry about it, but thanks for sending this over. And yeah, apparently I didn't do too badly because they ended up offering me an internship, and eventually after a year that turned into a full-time position as well. When Rebellion offered me that first position, I can't tell you how happy I was then. I was absolutely ecstatic. And I loved it. So I started working on the Sniper Elite franchise for them. I started as mostly doing user interface stuff. So we're working with UI designers to do mini maps and on-screen icons and the code that drives all this kind of stuff. And it was fun. But I was recognized in the next project on Sniper 4. I was kind of moved over to the AI team, and I said, well, why do you want me? And they said to me, well, you've clearly got an eye for like the player experience. You're not one of these coders who just write stuff and then submits it. You actually play it and figure out, well, is this good? Would the player understand this? So they moved me over to AI, and I started dealing with state machines and behavior trees and working on special enemy types. And that's kind of the route that my career started to progress down, this AI thing. I'm not like a super techie programmer, so things like rendering and networking I understand, but and I could probably do with enough time, but it's just not where my heart is. Like I like stuff that like touchy feely things that the player can really relate to, and I think getting inside a player's head and thinking, okay, well, would they actually understand this AI behavior that I'm putting together here? Can I sit and watch it and say, okay, yeah, the player would know what's going on here? That's what I really kind of really engaged with Rebellion. Yeah, after I left Rebellion, I actually went into education for a while. I started lecturing as a teacher for university, and I did that for an awful long time. The One of the things that eventually dragged me out of that was the opportunity to work on the Horizon franchise. I was a big Horizon fan, so working on a VR title in the Horizon franchise, I thought, yeah, this is going to be an awful lot of fun. And that was a great kind of 18 months. I absolutely loved working on that game. Day in the life of a game programmer. It kind of depends at what point of the project lifecycle you're in. Like early on, you're having lots of discussions with designers and creatives to kind of figure out, well, what is it you want here? Like they're busy writing these design documents and whiteboxing these levels, and you're starting to figure out, okay, well, if this is how you want the kind of the enemies to behave, then we're going to have to split it up into these behavior trees, and it's problem solving, but a lot of communication with team members. Whereas later on, much later on in the project, you are bug fixing, like you are playing the heck out of this game, finding these bugs, or probably being given these bugs by your QA department, trying to figure out why isn't this working or why is this doing the thing it is. So it's again a different type of problem solving, much more kind of closed loop problem solving, where you know exactly what the problem is. Well, sorry, no, you don't know exactly what the problem is, but you're trying to figure it out. And yeah, those are the kind of mostly the two big steps in it, I would say. What do I love about programming? I think it's the logical thinking of it. I think it's being able to structure a problem into discrete steps, and organize it to a point where it just works really nicely. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes, inevitably, you just create something that is an absolute mess because time limits and whatever else. But yeah, when those pieces align and you figure out a problem, yeah, it's a really good feeling. A really good feeling. I think the games industry is at an interesting point. I think there's a few emergent technologies that are still making waves or yet to make waves in the games industry. So VR has kind of been sidelined as its own thing, but it is still ticking up, and there's still a lot of interesting things going on with VR game development. Um, as well, I think as much as a lot of people hate it, I think the blockchain thing is going to start to get bigger and bigger in game development. I think larger companies have already started to dip their toe in, and I've worked on a blockchain project, and it wasn't what a lot of people think it was. It was actually a very cool game, and I think there is potential for blockchain to solve an awful lot of problems that some multiplayer games have. So yeah, there's interesting things going on, especially with the advent of AI. Like you see videos now of mods in Skyrim where you can actually talk to these NPCs and they talk back at you. I think that's the thing I'm most excited about. This idea of this kind of AI-driven role-playing game where you could actually talk to these AI and they can come up with things to say back to you that aren't totally scripted. Yeah, for me, that's the thing that I'm most excited about in games. I think my biggest piece of advice would be, find what your own strengths are and don't be intimidated by people who you see are much better coders, or just don't give up. Yeah, I knew that I wasn't that super techie programmer, and that worried me a lot. Like I thought, okay, I'm not smart enough to get this. um, that doesn't mean anything. Like there are so many different types of programmers, and yeah, there are some who are so much cleverer than me. But that's not to say that I don't have strengths. Okay, like I've said, like communication is a big strength for me. Being able to talk to a designer and understand what they want, and then being able to translate it into code, that's a massive strength for me. I've taught a lot of students, and there are some who just get it, and they will go on to be much better coders in a lot of ways than I will ever be. But there are also students, and don't tell anyone, but they are my favorite. The ones who just they struggle with it and they persevere and they try, and then a few years down the line, you're having a conversation with them, and they are just talking about this language as if they absolutely know everything about it, and you just think back to that time when they started and you think, yeah, I know exactly how you feel. And it's great when you see students progress like that. But yeah, that's the main thing, just perseverance and playing to your own strengths.